Ever felt like the world was against you? If so, you would have felt like Jade in Piecing Me Together, a powerful novel tackling topics of race, privilege, and family. Jade feels like her life is made up of hundreds of conflicting pieces. She is treated as an outsider at her private school and is constantly struggling to succeed in a difficult world. US author Renee Watson joins us to discuss this important and moving book. Renee is the best-selling Newbery Honour and Coretta Scott King award-winning author of Piecing Me Together, as well as the acclaimed novels This Side of Home and What Mama Left Me. Her new book, Watch Us Rise, is co-written with Ellen Hagen. Renee joins us all the way from New York in the USA. Please welcome Renee Watson.
Good morning. It's so good to be here with all of you today. I'm going to read a little bit from Piecing Me Together and kind of introduce Jade to you and talk a little bit about what inspired me to write her character. So Jade is in high school, and she is being bused from her neighborhood all the way over to the other side of town, which in Portland, Oregon means that she lives in a predominantly African-American neighborhood, and her school is in a predominantly white neighborhood. And so there's a lot of challenges that she faces being one of the only black girls at her school. She's also an artist. She loves to create art. And she's really passionate about knowing that her neighborhood, even though it has a lot of stereotypes about it, and there are a lot of things that need to be changed about it, it's not just brokenness. There's a lot of beauty there, too. And so she's trying to help other people understand that she's not just broken, she's beautiful, and she has things to offer. So this is from chapter 3. It's early in the novel. Not much has happened yet. She is on her way to school. I wake up before the sun, so early that only trucks and people up to no good are on the streets. There's nothing in the fridge but baking soda in the way back and half-empty bottles of ketchup, barbecue sauce, and mustard on the door. I drink a glass of water, take a shower, get dressed, and leave by 6:30 so I can get on the bus. I ride the 35 through the maze of houses that all look like one another, like sisters who are not twins, but everybody thinks they are. Living here means when people ask, "Where do you live?" and you say, "The New Columbia," they say, "You mean the Villa?" And they remind you that your neighborhood used to be public housing for World War II shipyard workers. And they remind you how by the 80s, a lot of those apartments were run down, and how really they are just the projects with a different name. At least that's what Mom says. She's always telling me, I don't care if they give the hood a new name or not. It's still the hood. Lots of people can't find beauty in my neighborhood, but I can. Ever since elementary school, I've been making beauty out of everyday things. Candy wrappers, papers from a newspaper, receipts, rip-outs from magazines. I cut and tear, arrange and rearrange, and glue them down, morphing them into something no one else thought they could be. Like me. I'm ordinary too. The only thing fancy about me is my name, Jade. But I am not precious like the gem. There is nothing exquisite about my life, but it's mine though, so I'm gonna make something of it. And not just for me, but for my mom. Because she is always saying, never thought I'd be here forever. But that's how things turned out. And when she says this, I know she means that if she hadn't had me when she was 16, she would have gone on to college, would have maybe moved away from Portland, would have had fewer struggles. She never outright blames me for making her life harder than it needed to be. Instead, she pushes me hard. Because no one pushed me, she says. One of us has to make it out of here. And I'm her only child, her only hope of remaking herself. Dad saw a different future for himself, too. But unlike Mom, I think I changed him in all the best ways. He's always telling me how I made him settle down, get himself together. And just because me and your mom didn't work out doesn't mean I don't love you, he always tells me. He has a girlfriend who I actually like, even though I'd never tell my mom that. Dad calls me his queen. He says I am the best thing that happened to him. I think about this on the ride to school, how I am someone's answered prayer and also someone's deferred dream. So when Jade gets to school, She's excited because she thinks that she has been chosen to be in a study abroad program, that she's going to get to go travel the world, help build houses in communities that are poorer than hers, and teach people English. She's really excited about that. But instead, she's been invited to be in a mentorship program. And she's really frustrated because she feels like this means her school only sees her as someone who needs fixing, someone who needs someone to come into her life and help her. But if she's in this program, she gets a full scholarship to college, so she wouldn't have to pay for tuition. So she says yes, that she'll do it. But she really doesn't like the women so far. And this is one of the meetings that she's getting to know some of the other girls. And she's trying to think of a question to ask. It's an all-girl group, and they're at this very fancy house, so she's kind of uncomfortable. And they've asked the girls to write down a question you have and anonymously put it in the box. They're going to shake up the box and go through the questions. And so far, the girls are asking questions about makeup and beauty tips and dating. And Jade is like, I have real problems and I have real questions. So she's trying to think of a way to phrase her question for these women. And she doesn't know if they're going to be able to answer it. There are 12 girls that are in the mentorship program. There are 12 girls who've been selected for Woman to Woman. 12 seeds, 12 prayers, 12 daughters, 12 roots, 12 histories, 12 reasons, 12 rivers, 12 questions, 12 songs, 12 smiles, 12 yesterdays, 12 tomorrows. Sabrina ends the night with a talk about following our dreams and believing in ourselves. You have to believe you are worthy of love, of happiness, that you are worthy of your wildest dreams coming true. When she says this, so many thoughts fled through my mind. I am thinking about how Mom had plenty of dreams, and EJ is not short on self-confidence. And Lily has known she wants to be a poet since we were in middle school, so it can't just be about believing and dreaming. My neighborhood is full of big dreamers, but I know that doesn't mean those dreams will come true. I know something happens between the time our mothers and fathers and teachers and mentors send us out into the world telling us the world is yours and you are beautiful and you can do anything, and the time we return to them. When I watch the news and see unarmed black men and women shot dead over and over, it's kind of hard to believe this world is mine. Sometimes it feels like I leave home a whole person, sent off with kisses from Mom, who is hanging her every hope on my future. By the time I get home, I feel like my soul has been shattered into a million pieces. Mom's love repairs me. Whenever Mom's cooking is simmering on the stove and EJ's music is filling every inch of the house and I am making my art, I believe everything these women are saying about me being a good person, about me being able to do good things. Those are the times I feel secure, feel just fine. I look in the mirror and I see my dad's eyes looking back at me, my mom's thick hair, thick everything. And that's when I believe that my dark skin isn't a curse, that my lips and hips, hair and nose don't need fixing, that my dream of being an artist and traveling the world isn't foolish. Listening to these mentors, I feel like I can prove the negative stereotypes about girls like me wrong, that I can and will do more, be more. But when I leave, it happens again, the shattering. And this makes me wonder if a black girl's life is only about being stitched together and coming undone, being stitched together and coming undone, being stitched together and coming undone. I wonder if there's ever a way for a girl like me to feel whole. Wonder if any of these women can answer that. So I'm going to close with a poem that's in the book. I'm actually a poet at heart. I love poetry. It was my first love. And in the book, one of the characters is a poet. So Jade is a visual artist. Her best friend, Lily, loves to write poems. And there's a moment of police brutality in the book that happens. And the person does not die, but they are assaulted. A young girl is assaulted by police officers. And so Jade and her friends want to do something about it. They're trying to figure out how to use their voices to raise up against injustice. So they decide to have an open mic. And there's poetry that's being read and art that's for sale because they're raising money for this family to pay the legal fees and the hospital bill. And so this is in the voice of a character, Lily, who is talking about the fact that you can go through so much in your life, but still have joy and still have laughter, and that sometimes it's the bitter and sweet happening at the same exact time. So for her, the fact that she can still celebrate and laugh with her friends is a little bit of a miracle. And this is called Black Girls Rising. Our black bodies sacred, our black bodies holy, our bodies our own. Every smile a protest, every laugh a miracle. Piece by piece we stitch ourselves back together, this black girl body that gets dragged out of school desk, slammed onto floor, tossed about at poolside, pulled over and pushed onto grass, arrested never to return home. Shot on doorsteps, on sofas while sleeping and dreaming of our next day, our bodies. A quilt that tells stories of the Middle Passage, of roots yanked and replanted our bodies. A mosaic of languages forgotten, of freedom songs and moaned prayers, our bodies. No longer disregarded, objectified, scrutinized, our bodies our own. Every smile a protest, every laugh a miracle, our bodies rising, our feet marching, legs dancing, our bellies birthing, hands raising, hearts healing, voices speaking up, our bodies. So black, so beautiful, here, still, rising, rising. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we can all agree that was really powerful reading. Thank you, Renee. So the woman-to-woman program that Jade takes part in, it's really well-intentioned, but it's also problematic in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah, so...
You know, we can have the best intentions, but sometimes our impact is not so great. So I wanted to write about the complexities of meaning to do well, but kind of missing the mark. And what do you do when you didn't mean to hurt someone's feelings, but the truth is you did? And how do you apologize for that without the disclaimer of, well, I didn't mean to? It's like, well, okay, but you did, and I'm hurting. And that's kind of what Jade is trying to explain to some of the adults in her life. Like, I know you love me, I know you care, but you're going about this the wrong way. And she has to find her voice to kind of advocate for herself.
So one of the reasons that the mentorship is problematic, particularly for Jade, is that the mentor she's paired with, Maxine, is perhaps in some ways not doing it for what you might think of as the right reasons.
Right. And they're both African-American women, and so the school thought that was going to be an automatic match. Like, you both have the same ethnicity, the same culture, but Maxine is very, very wealthy. So she kind of has a lot of pity for Jade in a way that Jade knows, like, hey, you're looking down on me. And so they have a little tension in the beginning of their relationship, because even though they do have a lot in common because of they have the same skin tone, right? But there's so many other things about them that are so widely different. So there's a lot of growth that both of them have to work on to get to a place where they can be in a good relationship.
I think that was a lovely part of the story. It was a coming of age for Jade, but it's also a coming of age for Maxine.
Yeah, you know, I didn't realize this till I was older. When I was younger, I would look at adults and I thought they were perfect and have everything together. And, you know, when they disappointed me, I would be so shocked. Like, I don't understand. You're my mom, or you're my pastor, or you're, you know, someone important. And then I got grown and I realized, like, oh, when you're an adult, you don't know everything. And
you're still just making it up.
Mistakes and you're trying to figure it out. And so, yeah, I wanted to have this relationship where Maxine is flawed and she's not the perfect adult. And there's a lot that Jade is actually teaching her. And she does teach Jade some things too, but I think the best relationships I've ever had have been where there's a giving and a taking from both parties, whether regardless of our age or our cultural differences, there's something that I bring to the table, and then there's something that they're giving me too.
And in some ways, I guess the journey is Jade realizing that she does have something to bring to the table.
Yes, that she has something to bring, and not to give up on people. She's very quick to quit. So when she realizes that she doesn't like Maxine, she's like, I'm done with this program. I don't want to do this anymore. And she kind of has to learn to forgive and to be patient with people, especially when you know someone means well. Like there can be this grace period that you know, can work on the relationship or the friendship, and you don't have to quit people and give up on them so soon.
But it requires learning to speak up, right? And that's kind of her journey, isn't it?
Yeah, she does not like to speak up for herself. She will write in her journal. She makes art about what's happening in the world. She'll talk to her friends, but it took a lot of courage for her to really figure out a way to say, this is what I need, this is what I want, and to not feel guilty for those needs and wants. Yeah.
So I think one of the things that is interesting about, you know, what you were saying about, you know, adults messing up is, you know, when you realize that her mum is only 32, she's actually very, very young. And her mum she's a little bit threatened by Maxine in the beginning, isn't she?
Yes. There's a lot of complex relationships between the women in the book. And, you know, I know a lot of programs that are coming into neighborhoods to help young people. And sometimes there's an assumption that these kids don't have good parents. And if only their parents would be better, then the kid wouldn't be, you know, so needy or wouldn't have these bad grades or whatever the thing is. And I know amazing parents who are hardworking and are doing the best that they can. So I wanted to show this mother who maybe doesn't have the highest degree of education. She's working really hard. But she also loves her daughter, and she is a good mother. And so what does it look like when what you're able to give still isn't enough, and people are coming alongside to help you? You know, she's a little jealous and possessive of her child, which she should be. And she kind of has to learn how to accept help, too. But also, I think there's some beauty in her saying to her daughter, look, I'm your mom, and I'm always going to be here. All these extra people in your life are in and out, and you don't know how long they're going to stay. But I'm in it with you forever. So they have a really strong relationship. I really wanted Maxine not to replace the mother, but to just be like an added support.
I think Jade as well is very mature in the way that she knows that her mum can't meet all her needs, but she also realizes that her mum is doing the very best she can to do that. It's not sort of neglect or lack of care.
Right.
She's been disadvantaged from not having a good education and having a baby at 16.
Yeah. I think a big part of the book for Jade's like kind of learning curve is to forgive and to realize that people, for the most part, are doing the best they can, right? Based on what they know, based on their experiences, they're doing the best they can. And they may hurt you in the process because of that. And if they do, and you don't say anything, then that's not their fault. They don't even know that they could be doing better unless you say something sometimes.
So that's one of the things that Lily says to Jade when she says she wants to quit the program. And Lily says, you know, yes, some of it is corny, a lot of it is offensive.
Yeah.
But what's the better option? Stay silent. Like, you quit the program, they don't learn how to make it better. So there's this sort of responsibility for Jade to speak up.
Yeah, and it's hard, I think, because you don't want the onus to always be on you, right, to make people better. So I always say, you know, I don't know, if I step on your toe and you say ouch, and I go into this whole, I didn't mean to, why, you know. The next time it happens, if I step on your toe again, we've already had that. You know I don't mean to hurt you. I can apologize a little quicker and get to the point of, I'm so sorry. But if I keep stepping on your toe, at some point, I have to watch where I'm going. I am clearly not being intentional about how I'm moving through space. And I think for you, there would be a grace point where you're like, you know what? Renee just doesn't care how she moves. Like, she really thinks it's okay to keep hurting me and say sorry, and then I'm just supposed to take that, right? So there's a balance of giving someone the grace, like, okay, I'm going to work with you because I love you, and so you hurt me, you're sorry, okay, we're going to move forward. You hurt me, okay, I'm sorry, you're sorry, we're going to move forward. And then there's a point where you might have to say, this isn't a good relationship. This doesn't work for me. If people actually don't change and watch where they're walking or watch how they're treating you. So Jade is trying to figure out, who are the people to forgive? Who are the people who I need to be patient with and, you know, love and figure things out with? And then who are people who, yeah, maybe this isn't the best fit, and how to move on. So she's trying to juggle all of that.
I think as well I got the sense of, the pressure on a young black woman like Jade, who is in some ways a role model. She's extremely smart, she's on a scholarship, and so she's in some ways expected to be a kind of spokesperson for her community, and that's a lot of pressure for a young person.
It is a ton of pressure to feel like you are representing a people or a community or an age group or a gender. If you're the only in a space, you become the representative of your group. And so she's also trying to navigate that, especially with her friend Sam, who is a white girl who has moved, who is going to the same school on scholarship and is economically poor like Jade. So they have so much in common, and they kind of get each other in a way that some of the other girls are a little more stuck up, they're talking about all these vacations they go on, and Jade and Sam are like, okay, well, we just kind of were chilling at the house over summer break. We didn't do anything.
And they also the other girls diss their neighborhood, like right in front of them. They call it a polished ghetto, and how depressing it would be to live there.
Right. But then there are times when Jade and Sam, as close as they are, because they are different, Jade has to kind of talk to Sam about, well, it's different for you when we walk into a store.
Yeah, can we talk about the store?
Yeah, so they go shopping together, like girls do. And the store clerk is racially profiling Jade. She's watching. She's also body shaming her. So it's a two-edged thing. Jade is a plus-size girl, and she's in this store that only sells clothes for thin girls. So the store clerk is kind of like, why are you even in here? Because you can't wear any of these clothes. And she's watching her to make sure she doesn't steal anything. So she wants to take her bag. There's all this drama, but she doesn't say anything to Sam. Sam also has a backpack, but she doesn't ask for Sam to leave it at the counter. And there's a woman who's watching all of this happen. She doesn't say anything to the store clerk, but when Jade walks out of the store, that woman goes to Jade and says, that was really wrong what happened to you, which is really frustrating, right? Because what would have been better is for that woman to say something in the moment and stand up for Jade. So she's super frustrated. She talks to Sam about it, and Sam is like, oh, I don't think that. Race had nothing to do with that. I just think they thought you were lording. You were just standing there. You weren't shopping. So maybe that's why. And Jade is like, no, it's because I'm black and you're white, and they didn't think you were going to steal anything. And so those are the moments when they're kind of learning. They're on their learning edge of how to be friends in this interracial friendship.
And I think that very much touches on the issue of privilege, which, it's great, it's becoming a lot more talked about, is that white people can't see their own privilege. So they don't think things are about race because they haven't been affected by it in the same ways.
Right.
And Jade says, I don't know what's worse, being mistreated because of the color of your skin or having to prove that it really happened.
Yeah. It's kind of the double hurt, right? The first offense is that this happened to me and this is so wrong. And then the second kind of like gut punch is when someone says, no, that did not happen to you. And you're like, no, I'm living in this skin, and I know what it feels like when someone is, judging me or mistreating me because of my skin tone, my body size, my gender, whatever the thing is. And so, yeah, their friendship goes through a lot because they're trying to learn each other. And that's one of the relationships, as I was talking before, that Jade is like, this is worth fighting for. I love Sam. She's my best friend. So we got to figure out, how to talk about race and not be so nervous around talking about it explicitly and naming some things, and that's okay to do. Yeah.
It's the story of Natasha Ramsey is kind of an undercurrent in the story as well. Can we talk a little about that?
Yeah. So Natasha Ramsey is the name of the girl who was assaulted by the police. And I originally did not have that whole plot story in the manuscript, the first few drafts actually. But as I was writing this story in the U.S., there were so many black people being assaulted or actually killed by police officers at the time. So all of in that poem that I just read, when I talked about, being pulled out of your desk and slammed onto the floor, pushed onto grass, all those instances were happening to black girls. And there was a hashtag that started called Say Her Name, because so much of the attention was about the men that it happens to, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, all these kind of almost famous names now. But there are also many women's stories who never get told. So I thought I just could not write about this girl who's thinking a lot about her body and her space in this world and what it means to be a black girl growing up right now without dealing with what's really happening right now in the U.S. And so I had to include that. And I wanted to make sure that it wasn't so tragic, right? So Natasha does not die, she lives. But I just felt like it needed to be a part of the book. So I added it very late, actually, in the editorial process. And I wanted Lily to shine a little bit and let her poetry be in the book, too.
But what Jade realizes is that no one at her school, which is predominantly white, is talking about Natasha Ramsey at all.
Right. So she finds out in the morning, right before she's leaving for school, her uncle who lives with her is like watching the news and looking on his phone, reading about it. And so she leaves the house very heavy and sad and just like, she doesn't know Natasha, but she feels like she could. And that's the thing that happens. You look on the news and you're like, this child looks like my nephew or a student I used to teach, and he just can stay with you all day. So she goes to school thinking everyone is clearly going to be talking about this. It just happened. It's breaking news. But none of her friends, none of the white students they're just going about their day like nothing happened at all. Mm-hmm. And including Sam. So that really kind of shows Jade that, wow, you can kind of live two different lives. Like you can actually have news happening and those stories maybe only impact a certain group. Mm-hmm. So she's hurt by that and really frustrated and has kind of like the worst day at school where she actually gets in trouble because she kind of gets smart with the teacher because she's just so frustrated and upset and no one's talking about it.
And she also realizes that if she does raise it, that those people will say, oh, that wasn't about race. She was just acting out with a cop and,
Yeah, so it's just that vicious cycle of, well, what if I do say something and then people try to shut me down? Maybe I should just keep silent and not say anything at all because it's just going to make me feel worse.
So there's something beautiful that her dad tells her in relation to keeping silent. He tells her that it was once illegal to teach a black person to read in the States, and therefore, like, reading and writing is so powerful.
Yeah, he is very, they have an interesting relationship. They don't see each other as often as Jade would like, but when they do, they have these very meaningful exchanges. And so, he raised her in a way that was like, you have to learn how to read and write because that was not one of your rights. Like our people, it was illegal because we know that words have power and that reading is knowledge, knowledge is power. So you need to be powerful. I want you to be a powerful girl. And so that means you need to be smart and learn how to read. So she loves language, actually, and wants to speak many languages and is very much aware that the more that she knows, the more access she'll have to other opportunities. Yeah.
And does that kind of echo your own journey in becoming a writer and finding your voice? And
so there's two things that really impacted me to write. And one is when I was 7 years old, so like second grade, I wrote a 21-page story. And my teacher was like, well, I think you might be a writer one day. I mean, can you imagine that handwriting at 7 for 21 pages? It was like a mystery. The teacher was absent from school that day, and no one knew why. Dun, 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 But I loved to tell stories as a kid, and my family didn't have a lot of money. We were wealthy and rich in so many ways, but money we didn't have a lot of. And so I couldn't afford gifts for people for birthdays or Christmas time. So I would write poems and I'd give them as gifts. And I'd be really embarrassed about that and kind of like give it and run because I really wish that I could buy something expensive. But time and time again, people would say to me, I'm saving your poem. I'm going to frame this. Oh my goodness, it moved me. I cried. And I was like, what? My words moved you? I couldn't believe that something I created could move someone. So I fell in love with language and writing at a very early age and just kind of felt powerful. Like I could write something and make someone laugh or make them cry or make them scared. I loved that. So I held on to that all through high school and all my life, just knowing that words have power. But also, I grew up loving to read. And I don't know if Beverly Cleary is a very popular author, The Ramona series is a series that takes place in my hometown, which is Portland, Oregon. And that character lives in Portland, Oregon. And I loved those books. And I knew all those streets and the names of the parks and the schools were all places that are real places. And my aunt lived around the corner from Ramona in my head. You know, like that's the street. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's where Ramona lives. And Aunt Mary lives around the corner. But there were no black people in that whole series. And so I felt erased. I felt like this is my neighborhood. These are my people. This is where I'm growing up, and we're not even in the book at all. Not even as a side character or a post. Like, no, we're not in there at all. And so those are the reasons why I write. I wanted to make my home, Portland, Oregon, visible, black girls visible in books, on covers of books. And I also believe that words have power. So all of that kind of was the inspiration for me becoming a writer.
Fantastic, yeah. Thank you. I think that's a lovely point for us to finish our chat, but we do have time for you guys to ask some questions. So if you have a question, can you put your hand nice and high in the air so that we can see it? Okay, we've got one down the back there. There's a mic coming your way.
When first publishing this story, how long did it take before you could find someone who would publish it, and how many times did you have to change the story until it would be published?
So thank you for your question. I think I had 4 books out, 2 picture books and 2 novels before this book got published. So it was easier for this one than it was for my other books because my editor was kind of already working with me and we had a relationship. So what happens in publishing is when they buy one book and you finish that, they always are asking you, well, what else do you have? And so it was easier for me to say, well, I have this story about a girl who gets a mentor and blah, blah, blah. So they signed it very quickly. However, just because they tell you they're going to publish it does not mean that it really is finished, right? So there were so many. I stopped counting at like 12 because I was getting sad. I was like, I'm never going to really get this book right. The first few versions went back and forth between Jade and Maxine perspective, and that was horrible. It really wasn't good. It focused way too much on the adult, and so it saw many, many drafts and revisions before it got to be the book that is published. I had to scrap the whole thing and kind of start over.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really sad when it happened, but yeah, I guess it is fascinating now that it's out in the world. But yeah, it's hard writing is hard. Yeah. And the real writing happens in revision, I think.
So I don't know if you guys have heard the phrase killing your darlings, but that means like cutting the words that you put your blood, sweat and tears into, but in the end they don't really serve the story.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, we've got another one right up the back there, nice and tall. Oh, there's one right there. We'll go there first. Thanks.
Did anyone inspire you to become an author, and if so, who?
Sure, I was inspired by many people in my real life, like writers who are like Jacqueline Woodson is a writer that I love and felt inspired by. As a child, I loved reading Sandra Cisneros, who's a Mexican poet, and she writes novels too. My favorite book is House on Mango Street. And I love, because she's a poet, she writes in this very poetic way and very kind of vignettes, short chapters. So if you read Piecing Me Together, you'll see that I'm kind of playing around with that. It's not traditionally told in these longer chapters. Chapter 1 is like 2 sentences. So I'm playing around with the idea of collage, of literally piecing little scraps from Jade's life together to tell this story, and I wanted the book to feel like a collage. So I think I got that from Sandra Cisneros and the way that she writes.
All right, we've got one down here, and then we'll come to you next.
When you were creating Jade's character, did you ever base it off characteristics of yourself or past experiences of yours?
So I always say there are pieces of me in every book that I write and of people that I know. And, I write realistic fiction, so it's very close to what's happening in the world and what I've seen. But Jade and I are very different. I'm not a visual artist at all. And I am one of 5. She's the only child. So I made sure that I'm not kind of just telling Renee's story, because in I need to just write an essay if I want to do that. It needed to be fiction. So yes, there are some things that are like me. I definitely know what it feels like to feel judged and to feel broken and to have people talk about my neighborhood and my community. But it was different for me growing up in Portland than it is for Jade as a character. But definitely based on real, true things that happened.
We had a question, in the second row here.
Would you consider making a book from the perspective of the mentor?
I thought about it, but she's not that interesting. I think what I like about Jade and what I like about writing about teenagers in general. You all are so passionate and you go all in and you're learning and growing. You have a lot of questions. And so, I don't know, by the time you're an adult, you're kind of set in your ways. You can still change, but it's harder. I like writing for young people and having the protagonist be a teen because I think there's more stuff to work with. You all are still growing and learning in a way that some of the older people are not. So Jade is way more interesting than Maxine.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jade is constantly questioning the way the world around her works.
Yeah.
And that's something that, unfortunately, we do less of
You
as we
kinda
get older.
lose, yeah.
We kind of get desensitized and worn out,
Very
I guess.
true. Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, I think we have one here. Thank you.
Do you prefer to write your stories first on paper or type it out?
That is a great question. I am a paper girl. I love a journal and my pen. I feel like it's more intimate. I feel like I get to know my characters better that way in the beginning. I do not handwrite the whole novel, but I do start everything I write. I start by handwriting first. And it just gives me a sense of the pacing in a different way than typing does. I feel like I'm more honest when I'm writing, because I grew up writing in a diary and I always have had journals. So it immediately takes me to a place of being raw and open with my language. Whereas for me, typing is more formal and it's something I'm doing. So I think I censor myself more. So in the beginning, I handwrite. And then when it gets a little long, I type all that out and finish by typing it. Yeah.
More questions? I saw more hands. There's one halfway back there in the middle. Keep your hand up. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
In what part of your life did you realize that you wanted to be an author?
Let's see. I'm not sure. I've always been I think there's a difference between being a writer and being an author, right? So I've always been a writer. Like I was saying, when I was little, I wrote. When I was in high school, I wrote a play that was selected to be like the spring production that my school put on. So I've always considered myself as a writer. I did open mics and slam poetry and all of that. I didn't know that I could be an author. No one in my, even though my teachers were like, you're a writer and you have this talent, no one really told me, you can go to college and learn how to write for children and you can do this thing. So it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that it didn't have to be kind of a side hobby or something I just did for fun. It could actually be a full-time job. So it wasn't until I was after college, actually, that I really realized I could be an author and publish my work. And then I wanted to do that.
I think it's different because it's like, if you think you might want to be an accountant, you probably know someone who is one.
Right.
Or, you think you want to drive trains or whatever. There's people around you, but you don't often meet writers.
Exactly.
And realize that that's a kind of an actual job.
Mm-hmm. That it's a career. It was always kind of a side thing. I feel like art is often treated that way. Mm-hmm. If you dance or you sing, anything creative is kind of like, yeah, that's cute, but what's your real job going to be? How are you going to make money in the world? And so I didn't know that I could do this full time and make a living as a writer until I was older.
Yeah, fantastic. We've probably got time for one more question. There's one way down the back there.
What were the origins of Piecing Me Together? Like, why did you first want to write the story, and how did it change over time?
So I have been both a student in programs where I got a mentor or I felt like someone was coming into my neighborhood to change me, fix me, help me based off of where I lived. So I knew what it was like to be Jade in that way. And I've also been a mentor. I've also worked in programs where I've come in and had something to offer young people. And that dynamic is also always so interesting to me. So I wanted to explore this relationship between a mentor and a mentee. And also, I worked with girls for a long, long time, and I just saw so many Jades in my life, and I wanted to see them in a book, meaning sometimes when we write about characters who live in challenging neighborhoods, they're written in such a sad, dark way. It's just like the worst things happen to them, and they're so depressed, and it's so heavy. And I was like, but there's also so much joy and laughter and peace and all these other beautiful things happening at the same time. So I wanted a book that was exploring like sadness and joy living right next to each other at the same time. So my inspiration was the real life girls that I've worked with and mentored, and then my own experience. And I also wanted to have a book. This kind of is a spoiler alert. There's no romantic love. There's a lot of love in this book, but no one is dating as far as like the main character. Jade is not interested in someone. She's really figuring out how to love herself. And I wanted a book for young people that wasn't centered around a romantic relationship.
You know, it's really funny that you say that, because normally I'm always like, where's the romance? When's the romance? But in this book, I didn't even notice the absence of that, so it just felt so whole without it. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of our question time, but Renee is going to be signing books next door in the bookshop, so if you do have a question, feel free to talk to her then. For now, please join me in thanking Renee Watson.
Thank you. Thank you all.